You
Yeah.
can't really just work off the publisher notes or whatever. And the problem, of course, is that nobody can say enough about a book without ruining it. We can't really talk about, you know, the end of Third Degree without spoiling the book. One of these days, I'm going to do an event where it is required that everyone who comes has read the book.
Wow.
If we didn't do so many events on publication day, you're only 2 days off pub date. So you can't really expect that. But I'm trying to figure out at some point, I would like to do an event maybe like 6 weeks after publication date or something, where I can fairly say to everybody, the thing about this book that really got me is the way it plays out. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So if you come,
Yeah.
read the book.
Right. That would be a relief, you know, not to have to constrict yourself. One thing hit me, you know, we were talking about the chains and the focal point of someone making the buy. The only thing I can say that I feel better about is, especially this year, having met a few buyers, they would ask me what I'm reading, and I would say, well, I just read this book by Robert McCammon or something, you know, definitely not James Patterson. You know, you wouldn't expect everybody to be familiar with The Night Bird or whatever. And
What a great book, by the
oh,
way.
I know. And here was this buyer for Big Big Chain, and she was, oh, I love that book, and have you read Swan Song, and have you read this? And so some of the people, and probably a lot in those positions of power, really are readers and really love books. And it hasn't always been the case, I've found, but usually I think so. That's who gravitates to those jobs.
I think that's unquestionably true. The problem is that nobody can cover the volume.
Right.
It isn't that people don't want. I didn't mean my remarks at all to indicate that these were just pencil pushing people who didn't read books or even love them. The difficulty is if there are over 2,000 just crime fiction novels published a year, who can embrace all that?
God, I don't even know that the number's that big, and I almost don't even want to know. It's why for a period of about 8 years I quit reading Publishers Weekly. I would realize the unbelievable volume of books that were just flooding out all the time, and I thought, I don't want to think about what the competition is or how much of a business it is. I just need to think about my little piece of it.
Well, unfortunately, it is. I've had a very interesting phenomenon going on in front of me this week, which was that tour schedules were largely set up for us when books were going to publish and when things were going to happen for the first 3 months of the coming year. And all of a sudden, they're shifting. And I realized that what's going on is that back at the publishing companies, people are looking at everybody else's schedules and saying, okay, there are too many authors here, let's move here. But what's happened, which I think is really fascinating, is that they've all jumped to the same place and made it worse. So it doesn't really work. It would only work if you were the only person
That's
who were
right.
going to be jumping. But, you know, we've gone from a jam January to a manic March, just whoosh, like
It's
that.
the same as the movie business. It's the blockbuster mentality. They juggle movie releases the same way.
Right.
If Spider-Man 3's here, no, let's back up a week because they want that big premiere. And you and I both know to hit the list, which is one of the gold standards, you have to have such a high velocity of sales
In such a short time.
in such a short time. That's why touring is almost passé, I think. You meet your readers and it does you and them a lot of good. But I think it has very little to do with selling 100,000 books in a week. You can't physically do it. Now, if you're Mitch Albom and everywhere you go there are 2,000 people waiting there, that can make a difference.
Well, but a lot of lists are weighted. You know, they're not strictly by volume. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on, and a tour can have a huge impact. You'd be surprised because sometimes stores like mine get weighted.
Well, yeah, I remember the days when people would figure out which stores were reporting to the Times and all
It
that.
isn't just that, but there's all kinds of ways that you can affect different lists and whatever.
Like that little bookstore in Blytheville. I know that
That's
gets
right.
a lot of...
That's right. Some places make more noise than numbers, and so I think there still is a real value in a mix. I mean, I agree with you that you can't. What I think is a mistake is sending authors to places like Costco, because I don't think people who go there, that's not the experience they're looking for.
Right.
If they're price driven or whatever it is. And I think some tours look like they're failing. I think some are set up to fail because the targets are misconstrued. And there needs to be more evidence about where it does some good and where it doesn't.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard to coordinate across a big
Well,
company.
publishers know amazingly little, I think, about who's actually reading and buying the books. I mean, they can track sales very well now just by volume and computer, but if I say how many women as opposed to men read my books, really my best indicator of that is just fan mail.
Right.
And how true is that? It may just be that more women write fan mail than men. You know, I don't really know.
I don't either. We have a gender-neutral store. I mean, for years I've heard this deal, you know, it's women who are, you know, buying all the books, and women in stores and women in libraries. I mean, everything we do, there are men all over the place, you know. So I mean,
Really?
I've never really looked at it that way. Sometimes it depends maybe slightly on the staff. I mean, there's me and one other woman, and the rest of them are guys.
Yeah.
In a lot of bookstores, maybe it's all guys or all women. You know,
The feeling I'm getting is more women for me. And I would think it's different for Lee Child or Brent Gelfie.
He has a huge female audience.
Really?
Jack Reacher's become, yeah.
Really?
Hot. Really hot.
Wow.
Yeah, he's developed a kind of, whatever. If he gets, I'm so glad that Tom Cruise isn't getting the screen role. I just can't imagine Jack Reacher as Tom Cruise.
Who is
Well, I don't
gonna
know,
be?
but I'm just happy it's not. It's kind of like when I was a kid, Alan Ladd was kind of, you know.
Oh, he was a small guy, yeah.
There was a wonderful line that said he was doing a love scene with Sophia Loren. He had to stand on a curtain, you know, or she had to stand in a trench, or however it all went. Or a wonderful line about Tab Hunter, who was doing some kind of romance with Sophia Loren, and one critic wrote it up and said it was like watching a tot climb behind the wheel of a Thunderbird.
Oh, God, oh, God.
Which I absolutely loved. Lord, so you're already thinking ahead to the next book, but I saw something on your website I wanted to ask you about. Obviously, I had too little to do today, so I was there. It was while my entire system was frozen. It says that you were working on a graphic novel called The Lost Century about contact between the Roman Empire and Taoist China?
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, I've always been interested in Taoism, and I've always been interested, you know, in history. But to me, that might be the most politically relevant book I could write right now, specifically because I think we're about to witness a clash of East and West, probably unlike anything I've ever seen, really. I think in positive and negative ways. I think China is going to emerge. It's going to be the Chinese century in the way that the last century was the American century.
And the 19th was the British?
Uh-huh. We're going to see the decline of American power. But more importantly, we're going to see, with the internet and cultural communication, we're going to see Western religion and philosophy interact with Eastern religion and philosophy. And what better sort of microcosm of that could there be than Rome and China, I think. And there was some historical contact, very small, between the two civilizations. And I'd like to play that up. And I had a friend who did some drawings for me that were very, very good. The deeper I've gotten into it, though, the more I've thought this may really need to be a Patrick O'Brien type novel, Bernard Cornwell novel. Now, I know my publisher doesn't want to hear that. That's not, you know, the next Greg Iles thriller. But to do something like that justice may take more detail than you can get onto a page. You know, Prince Valiant.
So you're thinking of a graphic?
Well, I'm starting to move away, I think, from a graphic novel and more toward a real novel. Unless, I think you could do a graphic novel where rather than mixing text and pictures, you had sort of facing plates, very detailed art on this side and more extended text on this side, and to go that way. That way it'd be sort of a middle ground between a graphic novel. It'd be almost like an illustrated novel rather than a graphic novel, which is sort of the fanatics will kill me, but, you know, a pumped up comic book. I don't think that's really going to serve what I want to do, but yet the art can add so much. So you can tell I'm not really sure exactly what I'm going to do with it.
Well, it's a work in progress, as we say.
But I get more excited about that than almost anything I'm doing, you know. And I have some other things I won't even mention. I get so excited, but they're so far afield that people involved in my career would panic. So I'm not even going to say it.
I like the Roman Empire. You know, the thing about Rome, there are two things about Rome I really like. It was much more tolerant. In fact, it understood that embracing diversity meant that you didn't have to fight it. And when they did, they were totally ruthless. They didn't wake up and worry about, you know, moral imperatives and stuff. When they wanted to whack somebody, they did.
Well,
you know, decimating, if you think about the whole origin of that word and whatever, they were willing to do what it took to achieve an end.